This video is brought to you by Tall Man Toys and Comics. Who doesn't love going to the movies? Every year, Hollywood loves to take kids' movies and release them during the summertime. And they still do that even to this day. But I think the one year where they really crammed it in, and probably one of the craziest years for family films, was 2016. I can't think of another year as crazy and wild as the summer of 2016. I mean, it was a bloodbath with kids' films. I mean, it was ridiculously crazy. Now, I was not a kid when all these movies came out. I was mostly in high school, though I only saw 2 of them. But the point is that 2016 was the craziest year for kids' films. Now, I'm not going to look at these films entirety. I'm just going to go over how they did at the box office and one of my thoughts on the movie. We're going to start from The Angry Birds on May 20th, 2016 to September 23rd with Storks of 2016. Now, I know technically both Storks and The Wildlife are not technically summer movies. They're mostly released in September, and September is known for usually the fall, but I don't really care because it's my show and I can do whatever I want. Also, I'm not counting any Marvel movies or anything with a PG-13 on it. I'm only doing the kids' films that are rated PG. Now, with that said, let's get started. Let's start off with the Angry Birds movie. Starting off the list is kind of a mediocre movie, but to be honest, I kind of expected it. I remember seeing the trailer for this movie when it first came out, and it didn't really impress me very well. Though when I heard the critics got a hold of it, I heard it got mixed reviews. So I watched it for myself and I thought it was okay for to say the least. It's not great and it's not good either, but it's a middle of the road kids film. First of all, I'll start off by saying something good about the movie. The movie looks beautiful. The animation is spectacular and it does stay true to the games. I think where Angry Birds kind of falls apart is with pacing and its storytelling. The first 2 halves of the movie, there were some jokes that did fall flat, and the movie just has a very odd, mean-spirited tone to it. And half of the time, it didn't even feel like an Angry Birds movie. It just felt like a typical kids film. But with that said, the third act, and once it gets to where they were trying to fight off the pigs, it gets pretty interesting, and it feels like an Angry Birds movie. It's not awful or anything, but I don't think it's also great. Though, with all that said, the movie still did pretty well, and even got a sequel a few years later, which, by the way, is a much better movie. So if you have kids, or you actually like the games, I think you'll like it a lot better, but for me, I'm kind of in the middle of it, but go check it out if you haven't seen it yet. Next, we have Alice Through the Looking Glass. Let me start off by saying that I actually didn't mind the first Alice in Wonderland. I mean, yeah, it wasn't great, but at least it had its own identity and had some very good personality to it. The sequel, on the other hand, does not have that. Alice Through the Looking Glass is a huge mess. It forgets what made the first movie so good, or at least tolerable to watch, and just pushes it through its boring story and characters that were likable in the first film but are boring now. And that's the best way to describe this movie. Boring. There's nothing fun here. The story, if you can call it that, is very confusing and hard to follow, and the characters are just as boring and forgettable as they were in their predecessor. Yeah, Sacha Baron Cohen is fun, and the visuals do look pretty cool in most parts, but it's just a very boring, forgettable movie. And judging by how this film performed, that's saying a lot. Is it the worst movie ever? No. But still, this is still not a good movie to check out. If you like the first film, you might like it a little bit more. But then again, I wasn't a huge fan of the first one, so I didn't get into this. But if you are very curious, it is on Disney Plus somewhere, or it is on DVD, so go check it out if you want to go check it out. But for me, and I do recommend this, don't check it out. I do actually recommend the first film. Yeah, that one has problems, but at least it was a much better, interesting film than this. Let's move on to Finding Dory. Now here's where we get to the big stuff. Finding Dory was released of June of 2016. And boy did it make a big splash at the box office, coming out the exact same weekend as Central Intelligence, and even beating out that movie. I love the original Finding Nemo. I think it's personally one of my favorite Pixar films ever. So I got a little bit nervous when I heard they were going to make a sequel, especially with the sequel having a lot of development hell problems. But what they turned out, it actually turned out pretty well. This is a very good movie. Now, is it Finding Nemo? No, but it's a good movie on its own. Dory is a very likable character, and I kind of assumed she would get her own movie at some point, kind of a spinoff, but it is still a sequel. Finding Dory has a lot of great drama, great comedy, its animation is beautiful, and while the story kind of takes a little bit of elements from Finding Nemo, it does still stand on its own and it's not very noticeable. Everything about this movie is just charming. These are very great likable characters and they're fun to stick around with. Any of these characters you know and love, you'll love here. The underwater world and the aquarium parts are fantastically done and are some of the best Pixar has ever done. If you like the first Finding Nemo, I say go check Finding Dory out, which I'm assuming you have, but if you haven't, please go check it out. It's a great movie. Now let's move on to July with the BFG, based on the book by Roald Dahl. Now, I have never read the original Roald Dahl book, so I don't have that much experience with it, but I am definitely familiar with its director Steven Spielberg, which is known for a lot of movies we all know. Though, while it's not his best film, I will admit the BFG is a passable movie. It's not a great film by any means, but it's also far from his worst. For starters, the BFG's design and his motion capture looks a little bit unfinished, if you know what I mean. It doesn't look awful, it just seems kind of unrealistic. Not to mention, the relationship between him and the little girl is not very interesting, and I've seen this relationship before in so many other different kids' movies. Though with that said, the rest of the CGI and the backgrounds look very ambitious and really nice to look at, and it can get a little creative at times. Like I said, I'm not familiar with the book, so I don't know the feel and the look or even just how the story goes. There is some effort put into it, and there is passion behind it, and some of the rest of the acting is okay. Though when it comes to critics and audiences, that was not enough. The movie ended up as a flop at the box office. It's probably because it had to go up against The Legend of Tarzan and The Purge election year. Overall, kind of a hard movie to recommend. If you just want something small and simple, then you'll probably get it here. Or if you love the original book, I think you'll find it fine. But if you want something more, BFG's not probably going to win you over. Next, we have The Secret Life of Pets. Now, both this and Finding Dory were the only ones I actually got to see on the big screen. And when I first saw this film, I actually really enjoyed it and was well satisfied. Though looking back as an adult, it's just kind of meh. Secret Life of Pets is no means a bad movie, but I don't know, I was just constantly thinking about Toy Story when thinking about the story. The story is just Toy Story but with animals, that's it. And sometimes the humor can get a little bit juvenile, especially with it being an illumination film. Though the movie does have its strong moments, there are some funny moments, and the voice acting and cast is actually pretty good, especially from Kevin Hart and Eric Stonestreet. And who'd ever thought The Secret Life of Pets would make so much money at the box office, and even garnered a sequel, which, that's a different story for a different day. Not really much I could say about Secret Life of Pets, except that it's just one of those kids movies where it's like, it's just for them, you know? But if you have kids, they'll probably like it a lot, and if you're an adult who doesn't have kids, that's going to depend on your taste. If you like pets or you like animals, you'll like this movie a lot. If not, then I say it's a definite skip. Next, we have Ice Age Collision Course. Now, for those who don't know, I really like the first 3 Ice Age films, as well as the Scratch shorts. But when it comes to this 5th installment, yeah, it kind of sucks. Not that it's the worst thing in the world, but it is pretty bad. At this point, this was the point where everybody was like, can we please just end this franchise already? The story is just the same old thing you've seen in the past movies. The subplots are very cliched and have nothing to do with the main plot. The scratch scenes, although fun and creative, are getting old fast. While the movie does have one standout character, and that's Buck, and it does have a few funny moments, that's not enough to really like this movie for me. This whole movie just felt like a total cash-in. While Ice Age 5 was a success, it didn't bring in the numbers that 3 and 4 did. Not to mention, it ended up as a bomb in the US. Yeah, this is what happens when you go up against Star Trek Beyond and Lights Out. This would also be the last film in the series to be made by Blue Sky Studios, who would later be shut down by Disney years later. And I feel bad because not only was there a lot of talent when making this film, but we actually could have gotten a better conclusion. Well, at least this movie wasn't buck wild, which, we're gonna talk about that in the near future, I promise. Let's move on to August with 9 Lives. Out of all the kids' movies that summer, this one feels like the worst. And it's not even in a so bad it's good way like The Room or Grown Ups 2. It's just baffling, weird, and insane. The movie was directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who also worked on the Men in Black movies. The movie was distributed by a company that I have never even heard of before. I don't know where this idea came from or why this movie was even made, but this whole concept could have been better if it was made as a parody, not an actual kids movie. The movie's story is just Freaky Friday, but without any thought put into it. The jokes are cheesy and lame, and the characters are unlikable, especially our main character. The only redeemable character that's actually trying in this movie was Christopher Walken, but even he couldn't save this movie for me. Though despite being panned by critics and audiences and coming out the same weekend as Suicide Squad, it was still able to make a decent profit. I could see this movie ended up being in the cult classic category or the so bad it's good category, but as for me, it just didn't do a lot for me. It was just so boring and tedious that it just made me feel uncomfortable. If you enjoy it, that's fine, but as for me, I don't really recommend it. Unless you want to see it as a so bad it's good movie, go at it, but for me, I don't recommend 9 Lives. Next, we have Pete's Dragon. Now, I don't remember being that nostalgic to the original Pete's Dragon, and what I mean by that is that I don't remember that many fond memories from it, but I do remember liking it okay. Though when it comes to the remake, I actually kind of think it's a lot better. It's not perfect by any means, and I will admit for fans of the original, it is a little different compared to it because it's one of those remakes. But as far as Disney live action remakes go compared to the other ones, this one has to be one of the better remakes. The movie has a lot of heart to it. Most of it comes from Pete and the family that he meets. They have really good chemistry, and some of the family members have some really genuine fun moments. Really heartwarming moments even. The stuff with the dragon kind of felt a little bit unneeded because with the story that this story is telling, but Elliot looks great. Yeah, his design's a little bit uncanny and a little terrifying compared to the original 1970s design, but he looks fine in this, and the movie does have some fun moments. Though with that said, it's not perfect. I thought the climax was a little bit cheesy, and the tone seems to be somewhat all over the place, trying to be both whimsical and dark at the same time. But then again, the movie does surpass it thanks to the acting and the atmosphere. If you have kids or anybody that under the age of 10 and think that they can handle the dark stuff, Pete's Dragon is a fine rental. The movie was a modest success, going up against Sausage Party the same weekend, so at least that's good. Go see it if you haven't seen it already. Also, take a look at this. You've got one film that is clearly a kid's film, but actually looks like it's made for adults. But then you have one film that looks like a kid's movie that is actually made more for adults. I don't know, I just find this so freaking funny. Next, we have Kubo and the Two Strings. In my opinion, Kubo and the Two Strings is one of the best kids' films of that summer. This movie is a freaking marvel. From its craftsmanship, to its musical score, to its characters, to its story, its world building, everything about this movie is just freaking phenomenal. I love Laika Studios, from Paranorman to Coraline to The Missing Link, to even the Box Trolls. This movie deserves so much recognition, and I feel ashamed too, because not only did I not go see this film when it came out, but not everybody else did either. Maybe it's because stop motion is already becoming extinct now and is only known for more like TV or streaming, which is kind of a shame because if I would have saw this on the big screen, it probably would have freaking blew me away. I can even safely say this is underrated. I know this is kind of a short one, but if you haven't seen this movie, go check it out right away. It's a great film, very underrated. If you love Laika or if you love any of the dark stop motion films, then this is a must see. Let's swing on to September with The Wildlife. No pun intended. For those who didn't see this film or even know about this movie, trust me, you didn't miss out on anything, guys. This movie is a waste of time and a waste of potential because, unlike Nine Lives, this movie actually could have worked if better writers were involved. But as it is, the Robinson Crusoe, aka the wildlife, as it is in America, is just a waste of time and is just so boring and so forgettable. The animation is cheap and low budget, the story is unengaging and uninteresting, the characters are a bore and kind of forgettable, and the music is just kind of standard. There's just nothing wild about the wildlife. No pun intended once again. I will say something nice about the movie though. I'm sure a lot of people that worked on this had the best of intentions because, like I said before, there's ways you can tell this story pretty well. Well, just take out the talking animals and turn it into a dark story. Focus on Robinson Crusoe and none of these bland, forgettable animal rejects. Even making this a kid's film wasn't such a good idea, and considering that this was a kid's film, I don't think even the kids and families cared considering how this film performed. At least Nine Lives had the decency to actually be entertainingly bad and actually got me invested in what was going on somewhat. I'm not saying it did it well, but you get what I mean. This film just bored me most of the time. I do not recommend The Wildlife at all. If you have kids, maybe, but for adults, it's a bore fest. Let's now end off the summer with Storks. Storks is kind of a hard movie to pick on. Not to say it's bad or anything, and it does have a lot of good stuff going for it, but it's just very standard stuff. Especially comparing the studio's last film, The Lego Movie, and how better that movie turned out. I'll just get the positives out of the way. The movie is very creative with the storks and how they deliver the babies and shows you where the babies come from and all that. It's very fun and creative. The animation is very expressive and very cartoony and kind of fun to watch. And there are some legit funny moments, especially with the villain. The negatives are that it's just the fast-paced animation could get a little tiring sometimes. Like I said, this is a really fast-paced movie, so the cartooniness and all the fast-paced action and humor can kind of get annoying sometimes. And there are some slow moments, and yeah, the stuff with the family isn't that interesting either. Now, Storks is no means a bad film. It's just kind of hard comparing it to the Lego Movie and how really good that movie was. But even as a standalone film, it's just kind of standard. As a kid's movie on its own, it's fine. But as a follow-up to the Lego Movie, it is kind of disappointing. But with that said, it's not a bad film and kids will enjoy it fine. It's just not something I was gonna remember. Though the movie did pretty well at the box office, so I guess Warner Brothers got something out of Storks. So, overall guys, looking back at that summer, I think the three easy winners are Finding Dory, The Secret Life of Pets, and strangely enough, Ice Age 5. Whether you like these movies or not, all three succeeded at the box office thanks to name recognition and strong marketing. And three of the biggest bombs that summer were The Wildlife, Nine Lives, and Alice Through the Looking Glass. All three films bombed because of bad advertising, bad word of mouth, and lots of crazy competition. Did you guys go see any of these movies that summer? I'm pretty curious. Please comment below and let me know. See you guys.